Chapter 19 of Ayesha, the Return of She. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ayesha, the Return of She by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 19. Leo and the Leopard. During the weeks that followed these momentous days, often and often I wondered to myself whether a more truly wretched being had ever lived than the woman or the spirit whom we knew as She, Hes, and Ayesha. Whether in fact also, or in our imagination only, she had arisen from the ashes of her hideous age into the full bloom of perpetual life and beauty inconceivable. These things at least were certain. Ayesha had achieved the secret of an existence so enduring that for all human purposes it might be called unending. Within certain limitations, such as her utter inability to foresee the future, undoubtedly also she was endued with powers that can only be described as supernatural. Her rule over the strange community amongst whom she lived was absolute; indeed, its members regarded her as a goddess, and as such she was worshipped. After marvellous adventures, the man who was her very life, I might almost say her soul, whose being was so mysteriously intertwined with hers, whom she loved also with the intensest human passion of which woman can be capable, had sought her out in this hidden corner of the world. More, thrice he had proved his unalterable fidelity to her. First by his rejection of the royal and beautiful, if undisciplined, Atene; secondly by clinging to Ayesha when she seemed to be repulsive to every natural sense; thirdly after that homage scene in the Sanctuary, though with her unutterable perfections before his eyes this did not appear to be so wonderful; by steadfastness in the face of her terrible avowal, true or false, that she had won her gifts and him through some dim unholy pact with the powers of evil, in the unknown fruits and consequences of which he must be involved as the price of her possession. Yet Ayesha was miserable. Even in her lightest moods it was clear to me that those skeletons at the feast of which she had spoken were her continual companions. Indeed, when we were alone she would acknowledge it in dark hints and veiled allegories or allusions. Crushed though her rival, the Khania Atene, might be, also she was still jealous of her. Perhaps afraid would be a better word, for some instinct seemed to warn Ayesha that soon or late her hour would come to Atene again, and that then it would be her own turn to drink of the bitter waters of despair. What troubled her more a thousandfold, however, were her fears for Leo. As may well be understood, to stand in his intimate relationship to this half divine and marvellous being, and yet not to be allowed so much as to touch her lips, did not conduce to his physical or mental well-being, especially as he knew that the wall of separation must not be climbed for at least 2 years. Little wonder that Leo lost appetite, grew thin and pale, and could not sleep, or that he implored her continually to rescind her decree and marry him. But on this point Ayesha was immovable. Instigated thereto by Leo, and I may add my own curiosity, when we were alone I questioned her again as to the reasons of this self-denying ordinance. All she would tell me, however, was that between them rose the barrier of Leo's mortality, and that until his physical being had been impregnated with the mysterious virtue of the vapour of life, it was not wise that she should take him as a husband. I asked her why, seeing that though a long-lived one she was still a woman, whereon her face assumed a calm but terrifying smile, and she answered "Art so sure, my Holly? Tell me, do your women wear such jewels as that set upon my brow?" And she pointed to the faint but lambent light which glowed about her forehead. More, she began slowly to stroke her abundant hair, then her breast and body. Wherever her fingers passed the mystic light was born, until in that darkened room, for the dusk was gathering, she shimmered from head to foot like the water of a phosphorescent sea, a being glorious yet fearful to behold. Then she waved her hand, and save for the gentle radiance on her brow, became as she had been. "Art so sure, my Holly?" Ayesha repeated. "Nay, shrink not. That flame will not burn thee. Mayhap thou didst but imagine it. As I have noted, thou dost imagine many things, for surely no woman could clothe herself in light and live, nor has so much as the smell of fire passed upon my garments." Then at length my patience was outworn and I grew angry. "I am sure of nothing, Ayesha," I answered, "except that thou wilt make us mad with all these tricks and changes. Say, art thou a spirit then?" "We are all spirits," she said reflectively, "and I perhaps more than some. Who can be certain?" "Not I," I answered. "Yet I implore, woman or spirit, tell me one thing. Tell me the truth. In the beginning what wast thou to Leo and what was he to thee?" She looked at me very solemnly and answered, "Does my memory deceive me, Holly, or is it written in the first book of the law of the Hebrews, which once I used to study, that the sons of heaven came down to the daughters of men and found that they were fair?" "It is so written," I answered. "Then, Holly, might it not have chanced that once a daughter of heaven came down to a man of earth and loved him well? Might it not chance that for her great sin she, this high fallen star, who had befouled her immortal state for him, was doomed to suffer till at length his love, made divine by pain and faithful even to a memory, was permitted to redeem her?" Now at length I saw light and sprang up eagerly, but in a cold voice she added "Nay, Holly, cease to question me, for there are things of which I can but speak to thee in figures and in parables, not to mock and bewilder thee, but because I must. Interpret them as thou wilt. Still Atene thought me no mortal, since she told us that man and spirit may not mate, and there are matters in which I let her judgment weigh with me, as without doubt now, as in other lives, she and that old Shaman, her uncle, have wisdom, aye, and foresight. So bid my lord press me no more to wed him, for it gives me pain to say him nay. Oh, thou knowest not how much. Moreover, I will declare myself to thee, old friend. Whatever else I be, at least I am too womanly to listen to the pleadings of my best beloved and not myself be moved. See, I have set a curb upon desire and drawn it till my heart bleeds. But if he pursues me with continual words and looks of burning love, who knoweth but that I shall kindle in his flame and throw the reins of reason to the winds? Oh, then together we might race adown our passion's steep, together dare the torrent that rages at its foot, and there perchance be whelmed or torn asunder. Nay, nay, another space of journeying, but a little space, and we reach the bridge my wisdom found and cross it safely, and beyond for ever ride on at ease through the happy meadows of our love." Then she was silent, nor would she speak more upon the matter. Also, and this was the worst of it, even now I was not sure that she told me the truth, or at any rate all of it, for to Ayesha's mind truth seemed many coloured as are the rays of light thrown from the different faces of a cut jewel. We never could be certain which shade of it she was pleased to present, who, whether by preference or out of necessity, as she herself had said, spoke of such secrets in figures of speech and parables. It is a fact that to this hour I do not know whether Ayesha is spirit or woman, or, as I suspect, a blend of both. I do not know the limits of her powers, or if that elaborate story of the beginning of her love for Leo was true, which personally I doubt, or but a fable invented by her mind, and through it, as she had hinted, pictured on the flame for her own hidden purposes. I do not know whether when we first saw her on the mountain she was really old and hideous, or did but put on that shape in our eyes in order to test her lover. I do not know whether, as the priest Oros bore witness, which he may well have been bidden to do, her spirit passed into the body of the dead priestess of Hes, or whether when she seemed to perish there so miserably, her body and soul were wafted straight away from the caves of Kor to this Central Asian peak. I do not know why, as she was so powerful, she did not come to seek us instead of leaving us to seek her through so many weary years, though I suggest that some superior force forbade her to do more than companion us unseen, watching our every act, reading our every thought, until at length we reached the predestined place and hour. Also, as will appear, there were other things of which this is not the time to speak, whereby I am still more tortured and perplexed. In short, I know nothing, except that my existence has been intertangled with one of the great mysteries of the world, that the glorious being called Ayesha won the secret of life from whatever power holds it in its keeping, that she alleged, although of this, remember, we have no actual proof, such life was to be attained by bathing in a certain emanation, vapour, or essence, that she was possessed by a passion not easy to understand, but terrific in its force and immortal in its nature, concentrated upon one other being and one alone, that through this passion also some angry fate smote her again, and yet again, making of her countless days a burden, and leading the power and the wisdom which knew all but could foreknow nothing into abysses of anguish, suspense, and disappointment, such as, Heaven be thanked, we common men and women are not called upon to plumb. For the rest, should human eyes ever fall upon it, each reader must form his own opinion of this history, its true interpretation and significance. These and the exact parts played by Atene and myself in its development I hope to solve shortly, though not here. Well, as I have said, the upshot of it all was that Ayesha was devoured with anxiety about Leo. Except in this matter of marriage, his every wish was satisfied, and indeed forestalled. Thus he was never again asked to share in any of the ceremonies of the Sanctuary, though indeed, stripped of its rites and spiritual symbols, the religion of the College of Hes proved pure and harmless enough. It was but a diluted version of the Osiris and Isis worship of old Egypt, from which it had been inherited, mixed with the Central Asian belief in the transmigration or reincarnation of souls, and the possibility of drawing near to the ultimate Godhead by holiness of thought and life. In fact, the head priestess and oracle was only worshipped as a representative of the divinity, while the temporal aims of the college in practice were confined to good works, although it is true that they still sighed for their lost authority over the country of Kaloon. Thus they had hospitals, and during the long and severe winters, when the tribes of the mountain slopes were often driven to the verge of starvation, gave liberally to the destitute from their stores of food. Leo liked to be with Ayesha continually, so we spent each evening in her company, and much of the day also, until she found that this inactivity told upon him who for years had been accustomed to endure every rigour of climate in the open air. After this came home to her, although she was always haunted by terror lest any accident should befall him, Ayesha insisted upon his going out to kill the wild sheep and the ibex, which lived in numbers on the mountain ridges, placing him in the charge of the chiefs and huntsmen of the tribes, with whom thus he became well acquainted. In this exercise, however, I accompanied him but rarely, as if used too much my arms still gave me pain. Once, indeed, such an accident did happen. I was seated in the garden with Ayesha and watching her. Her head rested on her hand, and she was looking with her wide eyes, across which the swift thoughts passed like clouds over a windy sky, or dreams through the mind of a sleeper, looking out vacantly towards the mountain snows. Seen thus, her loveliness was inexpressible, amazing; merely to gaze upon it was an intoxication. Contemplating it, I understood that, like to that of the fabled Helen, this gift of hers alone, and it was but one of many, must have caused infinite sorrows had she ever been permitted to display it to the world. It would have driven humanity to madness, the men with longings and the women with jealousy and hate. And yet in what did her surpassing beauty lie? Ayesha's face and form were perfect, it is true, but so are those of some other women. Not in these, then, did it live alone, but rather, I think, especially while what I may call her human moods were on her, in the soft mystery that dwelt upon her features and gathered and changed in her splendid eyes. Some such mystery may be seen, however faintly, on the faces of certain of the masterpieces of Greek sculptors, but Ayesha it clothed like an ever-present atmosphere, suggesting a glory that was not of earth, making her divine. As I gazed at her and wondered thus, of a sudden she became terribly agitated, and pointing to a shoulder of the mountain miles and miles away, said, "Look." I looked, but saw nothing except a sheet of distant snow. "Blind fool, canst thou not see that my lord is in danger of his life?" she cried. "Nay, I forgot, thou hast no vision. Take it now from me and look again." And laying her hand, from which a strange, numbing current seemed to flow, upon my head, she muttered some swift words. Instantly my eyes were opened, and not upon the distant mountain, but in the air before me as it were, I saw Leo rolling over and over at grips with a great snow leopard, while the chief and huntsmen with him ran round and round, seeking an opportunity to pierce the savage brute with their spears and yet leave him unharmed. Ayesha, rigid with terror, swayed to and fro at my side, till presently the end came, for I could see Leo drive his long knife into the bowels of the leopard, which at once grew limp, separated from him, and after a struggle or two in the blood-stained snow lay still, laughing and pointing to his rent garments, whilst one of the huntsmen came forward and began to bandage some wounds in his hands and thigh with strips of linen torn from his under-robe. The vision vanished suddenly as it had come, and I felt Ayesha leaning heavily upon my shoulder like any other frightened woman, and heard her gasp, "That danger also has passed by, but how many are there to follow? Oh, tormented heart, how long canst thou endure?" Then her wrath flamed up against the chief and his huntsmen, and she summoned messengers and sent them out at speed with a litter and ointments, bidding them to bear back the lord Leo and to bring his companions to her very presence. "Thou seest what days are mine, my Holly, aye, and have been these many years," she said, "but those hounds shall pay me for this agony." Nor would she suffer me to reason with her. 4 hours later Leo returned, limping after the litter in which, instead of himself for whom it was sent, lay a mountain sheep and the skin of the snow leopard that he had placed there to save the huntsmen the labour of carrying them. Ayesha was waiting for him in the hall of her dwelling, and gliding to him, I cannot say she walked, overwhelmed him with mingled solicitude and reproaches. He listened a while, then asked, "How dost thou know anything of this matter? The leopard skin has not yet been brought to thee." "I know because I saw," she answered. "The worst hurt is above thy knee. Hast thou dressed it with the salve I sent?" "Not I," he said. "But thou hast not left this sanctuary. How didst thou see? By thy magic?" "If thou wilt. At least I saw, and Holly also saw thee rolling in the snow with that fierce brute, while those curs ran round like scared children." "I am weary of this magic," interrupted Leo crossly. "Cannot a man be left alone for an hour even with a snow leopard of the mountain? As for those brave men," at this moment Oros entered and whispered something, bowing low. "As for those brave men, I will deal with them," said Ayesha with bitter emphasis, uncovering herself, for she never appeared unveiled to the people of the mountain. She swept from the place. "Where has she gone, Horace?" asked Leo. "To one of her services in the Sanctuary?" "I don't know," I answered, "but if so, I think it will be that chief's burial service." "Will it?" he exclaimed, and instantly limped after her. A minute or two later I thought it wise to follow. In the Sanctuary a curious scene was in progress. Ayesha was seated in front of the statue. Before her, very much frightened, knelt a brawny red-haired chieftain and 5 of his followers, who still carried their hunting spears, while with folded arms and an exceedingly grim look upon his face, Leo, who as I learned afterwards had already interfered and been silenced, stood upon one side listening to what passed. At a little distance behind were a dozen or more of the temple guards, men armed with swords and picked for their strength and stature. Ayesha, in her sweetest voice, was questioning the men as to how the leopard, of which the skin lay before her, had come to attack Leo. The chief answered that they had tracked the brute to its lair between two rocks, that one of them had gone in and wounded it, whereupon it sprang upon him and struck him down, that then the lord Leo had engaged it while the man escaped, and was also struck down, after which, rolling with it on the ground, he stabbed and slew the animal. That was all. "No, not all," said Ayesha, "for you forget, cowards that you are, that keeping yourselves in safety you left my lord to the fury of this beast. Good. Drive them out onto the mountain, there to perish also at the fangs of beasts, and make it known that he who gives them food or shelter dies." Offering no prayer for pity or excuse, the chief and his followers rose, bowed, and turned to go. "Stay a moment, comrades," said Leo, "and, chief, give me your arm. My scratch grows stiff, I cannot walk fast. We will finish this hunt together." "What doest thou? Art mad?" asked Ayesha. "I know not whether I am mad," he answered, "but I know that thou art wicked and unjust. Look now, than these hunters none braver ever breathed. That man," and he pointed to the one whom the leopard had struck down, "took my place and went in before me because I ordered that we should attack the creature, and thus was felled. As thou seest all, thou mightst have seen this also. Then it sprang on me, and the rest of these, my friends, ran round waiting a chance to strike, which at first they could not do unless they would have killed me with it, since I and the brute rolled over and over in the snow. As it was, one of them seized it with his bare hands. Look at the teeth marks on his arm. So if they are to perish on the mountain, I, whom the men to blame, perish with them." Now while the hunters looked at him with fervent gratitude in their eyes, Ayesha thought a little, then said cleverly enough "In truth, my lord Leo, had I known all the tale, well mightest thou have named me wicked and unjust. But I knew only what I saw, and out of their own mouths did I condemn them. My servants, my lord here has pleaded for you, and you are forgiven. More, he who rushed in upon the leopard and he who seized it with his hands shall be rewarded and advanced. Go, but I warn you, if you suffer my lord to come into more danger, you shall not escape so easily again." So they bowed and went, still blessing Leo with their eyes, since death by exposure on the mountain snows was the most terrible form of punishment known to these people, and one only inflicted by the direct order of Hes upon murderers or other great criminals. When we had left the sanctuary and were alone again in the hall, the storm that I had seen gathering upon Leo's face broke in earnest. Ayesha renewed her inquiries about his wounds, and wished to call Oros, the physician, to dress them, and as he refused this, offered to do so herself. He begged that she would leave his wounds alone, and then, his great beard bristling with wrath, asked her solemnly if he was a child in arms, a query so absurd that I could not help laughing. Then he scolded her. Yes, he scolded Ayesha. Wishing to know what she meant, one, by spying upon him with her magic, an evil gift that he had always disliked and mistrusted; two, by condemning brave and excellent men, his good friends, to a death of fiendish cruelty upon such evidence, or rather out of temper on no evidence at all; and three, by giving him into the charge of them, as though he were a little boy, and telling them that they would have to answer for it if he were hurt, he who in his time had killed every sort of big game known and passed through some perils and encounters. Thus he beat her with his words, and, wonderful to say, Ayesha, this being more than woman, submitted to the chastisement meekly. Yet had any other man dared to address her with roughness even, I doubt not that his speech and his life would have come to a swift and simultaneous end, for I knew that now, as of old, she could slay by the mere effort of her will. But she did not slay, she did not even threaten, only, as any other loving woman might have done, she began to cry. Yes, great tears gathered in those lovely eyes of hers, and rolling one by one down her face, fell, for her head was bent humbly forward, like heavy raindrops on the marble floor. At the sight of this touching evidence of her human, loving heart, all Leo's anger melted. Now it was he who grew penitent and prayed her pardon humbly. She gave him her hand in token of forgiveness, saying, "Let others speak to me as they will. Sorry should I have been to try it. But from thee, Leo, I cannot bear harsh words. Oh, thou art cruel, cruel, in what have I offended? Can I help it if my spirit keeps its watch upon thee, as indeed, though thou knewest it not, it has done ever since we parted yonder in the place of life? Can I help it if, like some mother who sees her little child at play upon a mountain's edge, my soul is torn with agony when I know thee in dangers that I am powerless to prevent or share? What are the lives of a few half-wild huntsmen that I should let them weigh for a single breath against thy safety, seeing that if I slew these, others would be more careful of thee, whereas if I slay them not, they or their fellows may even lead thee into perils that would bring about thy death?" And she gasped with horror at the word. "Listen, beloved," said Leo. "The life of the humblest of those men is of as much value to him as mine is to me, and thou hast no more right to kill him than thou hast to kill me. It is evil that because thou carest for me thou shouldst suffer thy love to draw thee into cruelty and crime. If thou art afraid for me, then clothe me with that immortality of thine, which, although I dread it somewhat, holding it a thing unholy and on this earth not permitted by my faith, I should still rejoice to inherit for thy dear sake, knowing that then we could never more be parted. Or if, as thou sayest, this as yet thou canst not do, then let us be wed and take what fortune gives us. All men must die, but at least before I die I shall have been happy with thee for a while. Yes, if only for a single hour." "Would that I dared," Ayesha answered, with a little piteous motion of her hand. "Oh, urge me no more, Leo, lest that at last I should take the risk and lead thee down a dreadful road. Leo, hast thou never heard of the love which slays, or of the poison that may lurk in a cup of joy too perfect?" Then, as though she feared herself, Ayesha turned from him and fled. Thus this matter ended. In itself it was not a great one, for Leo's hurts were mere scratches, and the hunters, instead of being killed, were promoted to be members of his bodyguard. Yet it told us many things. For instance, that whenever she chose to do so, Ayesha had the power of perceiving all Leo's movements from afar, and even of communicating her strength of mental vision to others, although to help him in any predicament she appeared to have no power, which of course accounted for the hideous and ever-present might of her anxiety. Think what it would be to any one of us were we mysteriously acquainted with every open danger, every risk of sickness, every secret peril through which our best beloved must pass. To see the rock trembling to its fall and they loitering beneath it, to see them drink of water and know it full of foulest poison, to see them embark upon a ship and be aware that it was doomed to sink, but not to be able to warn them or to prevent them. Surely no mortal brain could endure such constant terrors, since hour by hour the arrows of death flit unseen and unheard past the breasts of each of us, till at length one finds its home there. What then must Ayesha have suffered, watching with her spirit's eyes all the hairbreadth escapes of our journeyings? When, for instance, in the beginning she saw Leo at my house in Cumberland about to kill himself in his madness and despair, and by some mighty effort of her superhuman will wrung from whatever power it was that held her in its fearful thraldom the strength to hurl her soul across the world, and thereby in his sleep reveal to him the secret of the hiding place where he would find her. Or to take one more example out of many, when she saw him hanging by that slender thread of yak's hide from the face of the waterfall of ice, and herself remained unable to save him, or even to look forward for a single moment and learn whether or no he was about to meet a hideous death, in which event she must live on alone until in some dim age he was born again. Nor can her sorrows have ended with these more material fears, since others as piercing must have haunted her. Imagine, for instance, the agonies of her jealous heart when she knew her lover to be exposed to the temptations incident to his solitary existence, and more especially to those of her ancient rival Atene, who by Ayesha's own account had once been his wife. Imagine also her fears lest time and human change should do their natural work on him, so that by degrees the memory of her wisdom and her strength, and the image of her loveliness faded from his thought, and with them his desire for her company, thus leaving her who had endured so long forgotten and alone at last. Truly the power that limited our perceptions did so in purest mercy, for were it otherwise with us, our race would go mad and perish raving in its terrors. Thus it would seem that Ayesha, great tormented soul, thinking to win life and love eternal and most glorious, was in truth but another blind Pandora. From her stolen casket of beauty and superhuman power had leapt into her bosom, there to dwell unceasingly, 100 torturing demons, of whose wings some immortal kind do but feel the far-off icy shadowing. Yes, and that the parallel might be complete, hope alone still lingered in that rifled chest. End of chapter 19.